The Brady Bunch was the epitome of the perfect 70s family, but behind those iconic smiles lay a reality far darker than TV ever showed. From Robert Reed's heartbreaking secret life to the child star's battles with addiction and depression. 50 years later, the truth is finally coming out. Join us as we uncover the tragic transformations of America's favorite family in 2026. Robert Reed as Mike Brady, the sophisticated architect of a sun-drenched dynasty. Born John Robert Reitz Jr. on October 19, 1932 in Highland Park, Illinois, the classically trained Shakespearean scholar honed his craft at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art before assuming the mantle of America's premier patriarch. At the age of 36, Reed stepped onto the set of The Brady Bunch, instantly becoming the calm, commanding, and ever-patient blueprint for the modern blended family. For 5 seasons, his portrayal of Mike Brady, the wise architectural anchor of a sprawling 6-child household, offered a sanctuary of suburban stability. Amidst a decade of radical cultural shifts, he stood as the definitive duty-bound father figure, guiding his brood with a measured moral compass that established him as a towering icon of the 1970s television landscape. Behind the scenes, however, Reed was a complex man who lived a life vastly different from the easygoing character he played. As a classically trained dramatic actor, he struggled immensely with what he viewed as the frivolous and unrealistic scripts of the sitcom, leading to frequent heated creative disputes with creator Sherwood Schwartz. He famously refused to appear in the series finale due to his dissatisfaction with the plot. Furthermore, Reed carried the heavy burden of being a closeted gay man in an era that was unaccepting, forcing him to maintain a strict separation between his private life and his public persona as America's dad. Despite his initial misgivings about the show's quality, Reed remained a central part of the franchise, returning for various reunions and spin-offs such as The Brady Bunch Variety Hour and the dramatic series The Bradys. He ultimately proved his dramatic chops outside the sitcom world, earning critical acclaim and Emmy nominations for his work in landmark miniseries like Roots and Rich Man, Poor Man. Robert Reed passed away on May 12, 1992, at the age of 59 in Pasadena, California, from colon cancer. His passing marked the end of an era for television as fans around the world mourned the loss of a man who had become a surrogate father to an entire generation. Florence Henderson as Carol Brady, the radiant matriarch of the Sunshine Suburbs. Born on February 14, 1934 in Dale, Indiana, as the youngest of 10 children, the gifted songstress conquered the Broadway stage with her vocal prowess long before assumes the mantle of America's most beloved mother. At the age of 35, Henderson stepped into the spotlight of The Brady Bunch, portraying Carol Brady, the lovely lady who harmonized 2 families into one shimmering Technicolor tribe. For 5 seasons, she served as the compassionate, ever-patient anchor of a chaotic 6-child household. Amidst a rapidly shifting American landscape, she stood as the definitive strawberry blonde beacon of maternal warmth, transforming the role of the stepmother into a legendary cultural icon that would endure through decades of infinite syndication. While Carol Brady was scripted as the wholesome and proper mother figure, Florence Henderson was known in real life for her bawdy sense of humor, flirtatious nature, and zest for risque jokes, a vibrant personality that contrasted sharply with her television counterpart. Despite her outward confidence, she faced significant private struggles during the show's run, including a frightening battle with hereditary hearing loss that required surgery to prevent permanent deafness. Professionally, the cancellation of The Brady Bunch in 1974 was abrupt and fraught with difficulty, fueled by backstage tensions and contract disputes involving co-star Robert Reed. This left Henderson to navigate the treacherous waters of severe typecasting, which for years limited her opportunities to showcase her true dramatic range. Henderson eventually triumphed by fully embracing her legacy, evolving into a ubiquitous television personality and a master of the lifestyle format. She remained a tireless force in the industry, hosting The Florence Henderson Show and delighting a new generation by competing on Dancing with the Stars in 2010. She also showcased her sharp wit with a memorable cameo as the grandmother in the 1995 The Brady Bunch movie, proving she was more than happy to satirize her own wholesome image. Florence Henderson passed away on November 24, 2016, at the age of 82 in Los Angeles, California, from heart failure. She remains the quintessential American matriarch, remembered for a career that brought light laughter and a sense of family to millions of homes. Ann B. Davis as Alice Nelson, the wisecracking warden of the blue-uniformed household. Born on May 3, 1926, in Schenectady, New York, the double Emmy-winning comedic powerhouse brought her impeccable timing to the domestic front long before the Bradys became a household name. At the age of 43, Davis assumed the mantle of Alice Nelson, the sharp-witted, ever-vigilant housekeeper who served as the indispensable glue for America's most famous blended family. For 5 seasons, her crisp blue uniform and perfectly choreographed physical comedy provided the rhythmic heartbeat of the Brady residence. Amidst the swirling chaos of 6 children and a burgeoning suburban dynasty, she stood as the devoted surrogate grandmother, guiding the clan with a tireless spirit and a legendary sense of humor that transformed a supporting role into the very soul of the household. While Alice Nelson was famous for her mastery of the kitchen and her persistent pursuit of Sam the Butcher, Ann B. Davis was the polar opposite in her private life. She famously admitted that she possessed no passion for cooking and was perfectly content as a single woman, prioritizing her deep spiritual convictions over the romantic tropes of the era. This contrast led to a significant professional hurdle. The overwhelming popularity of the character resulted in severe typecasting. For decades, it was nearly impossible for Davis to shed the domestic persona, often finding her dramatic opportunities limited by an industry that could only see her through a kitchen window. The abrupt end of the series in 1974 only intensified this Brady burden, leaving her to navigate a legacy that was both a blessing and a creative cage. Ann B. Davis eventually found her ultimate fulfillment far from the Hollywood spotlights, retiring in the late 1970s to join an Episcopal community dedicated to religious study and daily service. Despite her retreat into a quiet life of faith, she remained a gracious guardian of her legacy, delighting fans by returning for various reunions and making a brilliant self-referential cameo as a truck driver named Alice in the 1995 The Brady Bunch movie. She spent her final years in San Antonio, Texas, achieving a sense of peace that surpassed her television fame. Ann B. Davis passed away on June 1, 2014, at the age of 88 following a fall. She remains the quintessential television confidant, remembered for a career that turned the role of the help into the most beloved member of the family. Susan Olsen as Cindy Brady, the pouting prodigy of the pigtail era. Born on August 14, 1961 in Santa Monica, California, the wide-eyed youngest child of a burgeoning media dynasty found her destiny under the warm glow of the studio lights long before she had even mastered her R's and S's. At the age of 8, Olsen assumed the mantle of Cindy Brady, the doll-clutching, pouting darling of America's most famous blended household. For 5 seasons, her golden corkscrew curls and signature lisp served as the saccharine final touch to the Brady family portrait. Amidst the adolescent drama of 5 older siblings, she stood as the quintessential baby of the house, a pint-sized tattletale whose innocent curiosity and wide-eyed wonder transformed her into a legendary icon of 1970s childhood. While Cindy Brady was perceived as a saccharine angel, Susan Olsen possessed a more rebellious and artistic spirit that often chafed against the goody-two-shoes image of the show. This disconnect created a significant personal hardship during her formative years. She was relentlessly teased by peers for her lisp, a speech impediment that producers callously encouraged her to maintain for the sake of the character's cute brand. Like many child stars of the era, she faced the brutal stigma of typecasting, finding it nearly impossible to shed the pigtails in the eyes of a Hollywood that refused to let her grow up. This creative cage eventually prompted her to step away from the camera for long stretches, trading the script for a career in graphic design to find an identity that wasn't defined by her nursery years. Susan Olsen eventually achieved a triumphant reinvention as a visual artist and a fierce advocate for animal welfare, finding fulfillment far beyond the shady rest. She famously channeled her creativity into designing shoes for Converse and carved out a successful second act as a vibrant radio personality where her true, unfiltered wit could finally take center stage. She remains a dedicated guardian of the show's history, reuniting with her television siblings for major milestones like a very Brady renovation and embracing the nostalgia of the fans who grew up alongside her. As of 2026, at the age of 64, she continues to reside in the Los Angeles area, a resilient creative who successfully navigated the perilous journey from the world's most famous nursery to a respected life on her own terms. Maureen McCormick as Marcia Brady, the radiant golden girl of the groovy era. Born on August 5, 1956, in Encino, California, the sunshine-soaked starlet ascended to the throne of high school royalty long before she had even finished her first year of teenhood. At the age of 13, McCormick assumed the mantle of Marcia Brady, the peerless, porcelain-perfect eldest daughter of America's premier blended household. For 5 seasons, her effortless grace and shimmering charm served as the ultimate blueprint for the 1970s American teenager. Amidst the swirling suburban drama of football heroes and the legendary broken nose crisis, she stood as the perfectionist princess of the pop culture pantheon, a magazine cover icon whose poise and popularity transformed her into a legendary beacon of youth that captivated the hearts of an entire generation. While Marcia Brady was the picture of confidence and stability, Maureen McCormick fought a much darker battle behind the scenes, contrasting sharply with her sunny on-screen persona. Following the end of the series in 1974, she struggled immensely with the heavy burden of typecasting, finding it nearly impossible to shed the image of the wholesome girl next door to secure serious dramatic roles. This professional stagnation contributed to a turbulent period in her personal life, marked by severe struggles with drug addiction, bulimia, and depression. She later revealed that the immense pressure to maintain the flawless facade of her character while battling real-world demons created a painful duality that took years of agonizing resilience to overcome. Eventually reclaiming her narrative, McCormick triumphed over her past through her candid best-selling memoir, Here's the Story, and a successful pivot into reality television and country music. She transformed her legacy from a creative cage into a source of connection, reuniting with her television siblings for major milestones like HGTV's A Very Brady renovation. Having enjoyed a stable, enduring marriage to Michael Cummings since 1985, she has successfully bridged the gap between her troubled years and a peaceful, celebrated present. At 69, she remains a cherished icon of the small screen, a woman who survived the intense glare of teen stardom to emerge as a resilient voice of hope and authenticity. Barry Williams as Greg Brady, the cool-headed captain of the cul-de-sac dynasty. Born on September 30th, 1954 in Santa Monica, California, the sun-kissed young starlet ascended to the throne of suburban royalty just as the psychedelic 60s were fading into the sunset. At the age of 14, Williams assumed the mantle of Greg Brady, the suave, bell-bottom-wearing commander of the sibling pack and the quintessential cool big brother. For 5 seasons, he navigated the treacherous waters of adolescence, from driving test disasters to the neon-lit musical dreams of his alter ego, Johnny Bravo. He stood as the groovy gladiator of the Brady household, a titan of the teen idol era whose shimmering charm and athletic poise transformed him into a legendary icon that defined the aspirations of a generation. While Greg Brady was the beacon of responsibility and wholesome leadership, Barry Williams harbored a rebellious, colorful spirit that occasionally flickered behind the squeaky clean facade. His real-world journey often deviated from the script. He famously admitted to navigating the set while under the influence of marijuana and managing the tangled emotional web of off-screen romances with his television sisters. However, the sunset of the series in 1974 brought a brutal professional sting. The industry struggled to see the man behind the pinstriped shirts trapping Williams in a creative cage of severe typecasting that made it nearly impossible to secure serious dramatic roles outside the shadow of the Brady patriarch in training. Williams eventually mastered his own narrative, transforming his nostalgic burden into a thriving empire with his candid best-selling memoir, Growing Up Brady. He successfully pivoted his showmanship to the bright lights of musical theater and a legendary multi-year variety residency in Branson, Missouri, proving his talents were as timeless as the show itself. From the high-stakes ballroom of reality dance competitions to the emotional homecoming of HGTV's A Very Brady Renovation, he has remained a tireless and beloved guardian of the show's enduring legacy. As of 2026, at the age of 71, he stands as a resilient elder statesman of the small screen, a man who survived the intense glare of child stardom to emerge as a celebrated architect of pop culture history. Christopher Knight as Peter Brady, the voice-cracking maestro of middle-child melodrama. Born on November 7, 1957 in New York City, the young performer ascended to the throne of suburban adolescence just as the flower power era began to bloom on the small screen. At the age of 11, Knight assumed the mantle of Peter Brady, the self-conscious, impulsive, and perpetually awkward middle son of America's premier blended household. For 5 seasons, his portrayal served as the ultimate blueprint for the growing pains of a generation, immortalizing the comedic struggle of a changing voice and the legendary quest for a new personality. He stood as the relatable everyman of the Brady residence, a teenage titan whose pork chops and applesauce delivery transformed the mundane middle child experience into a legendary cultural touchstone that still resonates today. While Peter Brady was often depicted as the emotionally scattered youth struggling to find his niche, Christopher Knight possessed a sharp, analytical mind that functioned with the precision of the high-tech circuitry he would eventually master. Like his on-screen siblings, he faced the brutal professional confinement of typecasting. The industry's refusal to see the man behind the middle child persona made it nearly impossible to secure mature dramatic roles. This creative cage prompted a drastic and daring pivot in the late 1980s. Defying the former child star stereotype, Knight largely walked away from the sound stages of Hollywood to conquer the cutthroat world of the computer industry, establishing himself as a formidable business-savvy entrepreneur, far removed from the clumsy antics of his fictional counterpart. Knight eventually orchestrated a triumphant return to the public eye, reclaiming his narrative through a string of reality television successes, including the high-stakes drama of The Surreal Life and My Fair Brady. He transformed his nostalgia into a powerhouse brand, reuniting with his television siblings for HGTV's A Very Brady Renovation and co-hosting the definitive recap podcast, The Real Brady Bros, alongside Barry Williams. Having successfully bridged the gap between his pinstriped shirt past and a prosperous corporate future, he has emerged as a resilient guardian of the show's legacy. As of 2026, at the age of 68, he stands as a celebrated figure of resilience, a man who proved that being the middle child was simply the first act in a remarkably distinct and self-made journey. Mike Lookinland as Bobby Brady, the wide-eyed dynamo of the Brady Brotherhood. Born on December 19, 1960 in Mount Pleasant, Utah, the spirited young commercial actor was catapulted into the center of a television phenomenon long before he had even reached double digits. At the age of 8, Lookinland assumed the mantle of Bobby Brady, the energetic ball-tossing and fiercely competitive youngest son of America's premier blended household. For 5 seasons, his portrayal served as the high-voltage spark of the Brady brood, immortalizing the relentless ambition of a junior detective and the legendary quest to outshine his older brothers. He stood as the undaunted underdog of the Brady residence, a pint-sized powerhouse whose earnest determination and wide-eyed enthusiasm transformed the youngest child experience into a legendary cultural touchstone that still resonates today. While Bobby Brady was often depicted as the sunny, athletic youth with a thirst for adventure, Mike Lookinland navigated a far more complex and physically demanding reality behind the scenes. In a striking example of the studio's commitment to visual uniformity, the naturally sandy-haired, wavy-locked boy was forced to undergo a grueling regimen of hair straightening and dark brown dyeing to match his on-screen brothers, a process so intense that the dye famously ran down his face under the blistering heat of the studio lights. Like his television siblings, he faced the brutal professional sting of typecasting. After the series concluded in 1974, the industry's refusal to see the man behind the little Bobby persona made it nearly impossible to secure mature, dramatic roles. Lookinland eventually found his ultimate fulfillment in the rugged landscapes of Utah, trading the script for a successful career as an entrepreneur and artisan. Despite a brief and public battle with alcoholism in the late 90s, a challenge he conquered with characteristic grit, he remained a steadfast guardian of the show's history. He triumphantly reunited with his television siblings for the historic A Very Brady renovation, and continues to celebrate his musical roots as a vocalist and keyboardist in a Grateful Dead tribute band. Having successfully bridged the gap between his pinstriped shirt past and a prosperous life of craftsmanship and family, he has emerged as a respected elder statesman of the Brady legacy. At 65, he stands as a testament to the power of reinvention, a man who proved that being the youngest brother was simply the foundation for a remarkably solid and self-made life. Vincent Price as Professor Hubert Whitehead, the melodramatic menace of the haunted Tiki Caves. Born on May 27, 1911 in St. Louis, Missouri, the silken-voiced sovereign of the silver screen had already established himself as a titan of terror long before his shadow ever fell across the sun-drenched sands of Hawaii. At the age of 62, Price assumed the mantle of Professor Hubert Whitehead, the paranoid eccentric archaeologist who transformed a wholesome family excursion into a surreal, suspense-filled odyssey. In the legendary 1972 episode, The Tiki Caves, he served as the ultimate theatrical foil to the Brady Boys, famously holding them captive amidst a subterranean lair of ancient taboos and flickering torches. He stood as the Gothic intruder of the Polynesian paradise, a towering powerhouse whose guest appearance provided a bizarre and unforgettable collision between the chilling world of cinematic horror and the day-glow innocence of 1970s television. While he played the menacing recluse with a flair for the macabre, the real Vincent Price was a man of immense charm, a gourmet chef, and a sophisticated art historian who lived a life that was the polar opposite of his sinister screen persona. He was known throughout the industry for his kindness, wit, and gentle nature traits that made him a beloved figure among his colleagues. However, Price faced the double-edged sword of typecasting. While his association with horror landmarks like House of Wax and his iconic Edgar Allan Poe cycle made him a global superstar, it also restricted his creative horizons. He occasionally expressed a quiet frustration that his deep classical acting background and sharp comedic timing were frequently overlooked in favor of the ghoulish roles the studio system demanded of him. In his later years, Price gracefully embraced his status as a pop culture elder statesman, famously lending his unmistakable voice to the narration of Michael Jackson's Thriller and bringing a wicked delight to Disney's The Great Mouse Detective as the villainous Professor Ratigan. One of his final and most poignant performances came in 1990 as the inventor in Tim Burton's Edward Scissorhands, a role written specifically as a love letter to his enduring legacy. Vincent Price passed away on October 25, 1993, at the age of 82 in Los Angeles, California, due to lung cancer. He remains one of the most cherished figures in film history, remembered not just for the villains he inhabited, but for the refined elegance and artistic passion he brought to every frame of his life. Jim Backus as Zaccariah T. Brown, the gritty gold hunter of the ghost town frontier. Born on February 25, 1913 in Cleveland, Ohio, the versatile titan of the airwaves and silver screen had already conquered the worlds of radio and animation long before his shadow loomed over the Brady family's desert expedition. At the age of 58, Backus assumed the mantle of Zaccariah T. Brown, the eccentric, bearded, and perilously paranoid prospector of the 1971 Season 3 premiere, Ghost Town, USA. Trading his country club ascot for a weathered pickaxe, he served as the ultimate rustic antagonist, famously trapping the wholesome clan within the iron bars of a forgotten frontier jail. He stood as the grizzled guardian of the Grand Canyon outskirts, a comedic force of nature whose rugged transformation shattered his millionaire image and injected a thrilling jolt of Western peril into the heart of the Brady's suburban odyssey. Despite his reputation for playing confident, boisterous, or wealthy characters, Backus was a man of deep sensitivity who battled significant internal struggles. He suffered from severe hypochondria and anxiety for much of his life, a sharp contrast to the blustering bravado of characters like Zaccariah T. Brown or the iconic Thurston Howell III. Professionally, he faced the relentless frustration of extreme typecasting, the immense popularity of Gilligan's Island, and his voice work as the nearsighted Mr. Magoo made it difficult for producers to see his dramatic depth, often overshadowing the raw talent he displayed in classics like Rebel Without a Cause. As he aged, he also faced the debilitating challenge of Parkinson's disease, which gradually robbed him of his physical agility and made the act of performance an increasingly arduous battle. Jim Backus remained a beloved industry figure, continuing to work through his illness by writing books with his wife Henny and participating in various television reunions. He maintained a sharp sense of humor about his condition, even titling his memoir Backus Strikes Back, but his health eventually forced him into a quiet retirement. Jim Backus passed away on July 3, 1989, at the age of 76 in Los Angeles, California, from complications resulting from pneumonia and Parkinson's disease. He remains a legendary figure of character, acting remembered for a career that could pivot from the height of high society comedy to the dusty, dangerous depths of a desert ghost town. Plumb as Jan Brady, the bespectacled sovereign of the middle child malaise. Born on April 29, 1958 in Burbank, California, the wide-eyed and weary young performer ascended to the throne of teenage insecurity just as the Technicolor 70s began to glow. At the age of 11, Plumb assumed the mantle of Jan Brady, the vulnerable, neurotic, and perpetually overlooked middle daughter of America's premier blended household. For 5 seasons, her portrayal served as the ultimate emotional lightning rod for the sibling experience, immortalizing the agonizing shadow of a popular older sister and the legendary teeth-gritting lament, Marcia, Marcia, Marcia. She stood as the authentic voice of the adolescent outsider, a nuanced powerhouse whose quest for an identity, complete with glasses, wigs, and wonky trophies, transformed her into a legendary icon for every child who ever felt lost in the middle. While Jan Brady was often defined by her insecurities and frantic attempts to be noticed, Plumb possessed a fierce independence and a gritty artistic spirit that stood in stark contrast to her neurotic on-screen persona. This drive for autonomy led to a legendary moment of professional friction. She was the only original cast member to refuse a 5-year contract for the 1976 Variety spin-off, making her a Brady rebel in her deliberate quest to escape the pigtail and polka dot cage. Breaking the wholesome mold proved to be a brutal challenge, yet she pivoted with shocking bravery, starring as a prostitute in the gritty TV movie Dawn Portrait of a Teenage Runaway. It was a bold, career-defining gamble that forced audiences to see the serious adult actor beneath the middle child stereotype. In the decades that followed, Plumb successfully orchestrated a dual career life, establishing herself as an accomplished painter, with prestigious gallery exhibitions across the country, while continuing to hone her craft on stage and screen. She transformed her nostalgic burden into a source of strength, participating in HGTV's A Very Brady Renovation, while simultaneously earning critical praise for modern un-Brady projects like the brutal thriller Blue Ruin and the HBO series Crashing. Having moved to New York City to further her artistic pursuits, she has emerged as a resilient elder statesman of the industry. As of 2026, at the age of 68, she remains a celebrated figure of creative reinvention, a woman who famously found her voice by stepping out from the middle and into a brilliant spotlight of her own making. Marcia Wallace as Mrs. Robbins, the fiery-haired facilitator of the Prom Night Promise. Born on November 1st, 1942 in Creston, Iowa, the tall, vibrant, and razor-witted redhead was poised on the precipice of television immortality long before her laugh became a staple of the sitcom landscape. At the age of 29, Wallace assumed the mantle of Mrs. Robbins, the sensible and slightly skeptical schoolteacher caught in the crossfire of one of television's most desperate crusades. In the legendary 1971 episode, Getting Davy Jones, she served as the authoritative anchor to the high-stakes drama of Marcia Brady's impossible prom night pledge. She stood as the polished professional of the North Fork classroom, a guest-starring powerhouse whose distinct presence added a layer of grounded flair to a cultural touchstone. Appearing just 1 year before, she would become a household name in her own right. In stark contrast to the somewhat straight-laced teacher she portrayed, Marcia Wallace was a force of nature in real life, celebrated for her raucous laugh, self-deprecating wit, and a larger-than-life personality. She famously joked about her lean early years in New York, quipping that her bank account needed to match her weight just to survive. However, her personal journey was marked by profound resilience and private hardship. She faced a grueling battle with breast cancer starting in 1985, transforming her struggle into a platform for fierce activism. This was followed by the tragic loss of her husband Dennis Hawley in 1992, which forced her to navigate the unpredictable tides of Hollywood as a single mother while simultaneously maintaining her status as a comedic icon. Marcia Wallace went on to achieve television legend status, first as the lovelorn, wisecracking receptionist Carol Kester on The Bob Newhart Show, and later as the cynical, chain-smoking voice of fourth-grade fatigue Edna Crabapple on The Simpsons. Her performance as Edna earned her a Primetime Emmy Award and made her "ha" catchphrase a global phenomenon. She remained a beloved figure of strength and humor until her final days. Marcia Wallace passed away on October 25, 2013, at the age of 70 in Los Angeles, California. The world changed, but our love for the Brady Bunch stayed frozen in time, even as the actors faced the harsh realities of life and loss. It is a sensational, bittersweet legacy that still defines an entire generation. Was there a specific fact today that completely surprised you? Share your reaction in the comments. I like this video to show your support and subscribe for more nostalgic journeys.